I've got a combination of personal and professional experience. Personal experience, unfortunately, losing my daughter for many, many years and going through the family courts, getting a wonderful order that was in the best interest of the child for her to see me, but the order being ignored and the order not being enforced. So I haven't seen my daughter or communicated with her in any way for many, many years, and all communications and presents have been rejected and returned to me. The issue of parental alienation or the dysfunctional family dynamic is prevalent throughout the world. I've traveled a lot of the world. I've been to conferences on PA. I know some of the top experts in this area, and unfortunately, country upon country, the dynamic is so very similar. The ways of spotting the dynamic when you know how to see it is exactly the same, and the dynamic just appears in different contexts. Almost hear the same actors just acting in a different way. I think the word parental alienation is a useful label. I know when I was first involved with it, I didn't understand what was going on, how a daughter who I had such a close and loving connection with could suddenly start distancing herself and becoming more and more distant, literally by the hour and the day from me. It's a useful term to describe the dynamic, a very, very complex dynamic, but it allowed me to start researching it and gathering what information was available all those years back. Now obviously there's a lot more available. It's a lot more mainstream. Unfortunately, I think the human nature that we have all built within us is a combination of loving kindness. We always believe the best in everybody, our children and also our other partner, even if we're separating. And we also believe this can't be happening to us. We have a lot of hope that things will change. And it takes a long, long time to realize this. When I was first involved, I met a father who had, in my words, given up on his child. And it took me another 10 years to realize that he hadn't given up on his child. He just understood what had happened and the challenges. And he believed for his survival, and also for his daughter's survival, it was best for him to stop putting the pressure on to try and restore that relationship. I think in this day and age, when you can see the signs from a clinical or professional person's opinion, whether it's a lawyer or a psychologist, you can see it very, very quickly. As for the parent immersed in the entropy of what's going on, you're in the middle of this tornado, and I don't think you can see the wood through the trees. So it takes a long time and a lot of time of convincing. Anything that causes a child to be damaged in their thinking for life and affects all the people they connect to, including their relationships and their children, has to be a form of abuse. And the fact that it is a child going through this makes it child abuse. But I think it's also a form of domestic abuse. And working in this area, and doctors and experts would agree it's a form of abuse. Can a snake bite be reversed? Will you die? And it depends on the snake that's doing the biting, the degree of venom, how much venom has been injected, how long the victim has been subjected to this venom. So in my humble opinion, the earlier we can spot it and have earlier intervention, the more chance we have of reversing it. When it's embedded, it becomes very difficult. And it's often very difficult to describe to a layperson, because a layperson considers, well, the parent must have done something if the child hates them or doesn't want to be with them. And if we look at the power of beliefs, if you look at a suicide bomber, how that person can have the belief not only to destroy innocent lives but themselves, just based on one belief. And that belief's been handed to them by an organization. Imagine a belief that's been passed on to a parent who you love, who's providing your protection, your food, your safety, and the only person you have in your life, and they're passing on that belief. That belief is inbuilt into your system, into your brain. What fires together, wires together in the brain as such, and you hold that with you. So it would take a large triggering event, typically a boyfriend or husband or wife saying, well, I've met your mother or your father, why haven't I met the other one? And perhaps knowledge and information, and then the willingness for that child to actually investigate what actually happened to them. One of the things, having gone through this myself, is the helplessness of the targeted parent. The harder you try, the worse it gets. It's like being in quicksand. The more you do, the worse it gets. So intervention is needed in some capacity. That intervention, if early on, could be setting doubts where a friend of the alienator could say, well, why are you really doing this? That parent's been a great parent. There's no reason for this. Unfortunately, that parent will then either fabricate a story that they've done something wrong, or used a small event as a catalyst to let that person believe that they're justified in what they're doing. And I think a lot of alienated parents will believe that they're completely justified and they're protecting their child. So that's a difficult element. As it moves further down the chain, you've got pastors, maybe a church community or religious community that could help and intervene if they understand the parental alienation dynamic and can question it. So if a child comes to a new school and the mother or father signs them up, they say, well, where's the other parent? And the typical answer is, oh, they're dangerous, or they don't want to be part of the child's life. And it's an opportunity for that professional, that school administrator, the teacher, the head master, to say, well, actually, we'd like to speak to them to get their view on it and actually make it mandated to actually speak. So there's another opportunity. And one of the biggest challenges we find in court is, certainly in the UK courts, it's a focus on the voice of the child. And in alienation, the voice of the child, because the child is enmeshed with the alienating parent, it's not the voice of the child, it's the voice of the parent coming through the child. And this distinction is hugely important working in these cases, and often missed by court professionals who are not trained or have knowledge in this particular area. The more people we can educate who can say, well, hang on a second, maybe we can question the ideas of what's going on here, the more chance we've got of helping more families, and mainly the children within those families. So it's very difficult to pinpoint individuals who would maybe move in this direction, but it's very easy to pinpoint the signs as this is occurring. Now let's look at why it's occurring and to what degree, and how we can work with this individual. In domestic violence, we often talk about perpetrators, and in PA we talk about perpetrators. I prefer to talk about a parent who's alienating and have empathy and compassion and understanding of what's causing this behavior and how can we help them. And most importantly, for courts and professionals to actually measure those results. And courts make the best decisions for the best interest in a child. But when do they go back and measure it? 5 years after, 10 years after, for the 20 years after, for the child, for the mother, for the father, or the two mothers, the two fathers, the family, the grandparents? When do we actually measure that effectiveness of what they state is in the best interest of a child? And unfortunately, we're lacking this. And if you looked at any other company being measured on how it performs, they wouldn't get away with not actually measuring that performance, but being stated, we're doing a great performance. So I think we need to take a more scientific and logical approach to statistically analyzing what works and what doesn't as far as best practice. But I also think we need to take a humane approach of understanding the psychology of humans and the dynamic which is transgenerational, because if we don't stop it in the next few generations here, it's going to propagate and propagate, and one damaged relationship will end up being another and end up with further child abuse. For any parents going through the parental alienation dynamic, or just where a child is refusing to see a loving parent, to sit back and question, do I love my child more than I hate my ex? Do I really want to put my child first, or am I putting my needs before theirs? And can I sit back and really open my mind to say, instead of rejecting help, let's bring help on board. If I can't get this to work for my family, how can I get this to work?